This is the 2013 Mac Pro. It's also the current Mac Pro. Let's talk about it. So before we jump right into the video, I'd like to thank longtime channel sponsor Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is an online learning platform that aims to help you enhance your digital skill set with online classes that you can pick all at your own pace. You can tailor your learning experience to suit what you're interested in, and you can take classes whenever you want in hundreds of different categories. As usual, I'll have a link down in the description below, and the first 500 people to click and sign up will get a free 2-month trial of Skillshare Premium. When whoever bought this Mac Pro bought it new in May of 2014, it cost them $3,800. Today, you can buy pretty much this same exact machine for $3,600 new from Apple. Do not, I repeat with the strongest emphasis, do not buy this machine new from Apple or any other version of the current Mac Pro. Just don't do it. There's just no reason to buy this thing new when you could buy it used like I did for $1,300. And that's where the story gets a little more complicated. The unit that I have is a customized build. It features the upgraded 6-core Intel Xeon E5 1650 V2 at 3.5 GHz, 32 GB of 1866 MHz DDR3 ECC memory, a 500 GB solid-state drive that I installed myself, which is of course linked down in the description below, and the base graphics, dual AMD FirePro D300 with a combined 4 GB of VRAM. I paid $1,380 for this thing with the upgraded SSD included, but realistically, if you look through eBay at similarly spec'd Mac Pros, they go to about $1,600. So let's start our Mac Pro journey with the design. And regardless of what you think about this machine or any of the other considerations that we're going to talk about, this thing is gorgeous. I think this is one of the best designs Apple has ever produced. This thing is timeless. Even though it's 6 years old, it just oozes class and quality. The attention to detail here is incredible. Every opening on the aluminum enclosure is chamfered to a mirror finish. The ports are arranged with white LED surrounds, so when you turn the device to gain access to them, they light up in a really satisfying animation. Even the vent cutouts on the bottom are so slick and subtle, it almost looks like this thing is a solid log of aluminum. The entire computer is a cylinder, hence the frequent nickname trash can for this generation of Mac Pro. This is due in large part to the fact that it's essentially a computer designed around its own cooling system. If we take off the shell, you can see that unlike most computers, the fan doesn't blow through the heatsink, it actually sucks air up the heatsink and then exhausts out the top of the case. The Xeon and dual graphics cards are mounted along the sides of the triangular, very Darth Vader looking heatsink. This is a design that revolves around cooling, and it shows. First, this is a very quiet machine. Under most circumstances, the fans are at idle, only really kicking in when the GPUs are under load. The CPU can run at full tilt without any fan intervention at all, even for long periods of time. When I ran Cinebench R20 back-to-back a few times, the CPU ran at or just above the 3.5 GHz base clock, even after more than an hour of taxing the system. Weirdly, the power draw was stuck to 90 watts, even though the CPU is rated for 120 watts. This is a phenomenon that I also noticed when testing my 2019 i9 iMac. However, in the case of the iMac, this was largely for thermal reasons. Apple was restricting the power usage of the CPU so it wouldn't get too hot and overtax the cooling system. but that's not the case here. There's plenty of thermal headroom on this thing, even with the fans running at idle. The power limit hasn't really affected performance though, as when I ran Cinebench and Geekbench, I was scoring at or above the expected targets for this CPU, whether in a Mac or not. During extended Cinebench testing, the fan was sitting at idle RPMs, and CPU temps only ever reached 68 degrees Celsius. 68. That's practically balmy. This has to be the best cooled Mac of the last 10 to 15 years, which is really incredible considering the fan is sucking air through the case and only running at 800 RPM at idle. To give you a better idea of where this thing sits performance-wise in comparison to other Macs, let's run through some other tests. Cinebench R20 yielded a score of 2085 CB. Geekbench 4 saw a multi-core score of 19,865 on average, and the dual D300 GPUs scored 71,184 in the Geekbench compute test. Moving over to Unigine Heaven on the Ultra preset, I got a score of 633, and throughout the test, the GPUs maintained a really nice temperature, maxing out at about 55 degrees Celsius after half an hour of running the benchmark. The D300 base graphics on this thing aren't that bad. They perform roughly in line with an RX 560 desktop card, so recent games such as Hitman run fairly well at 1440p, and Civ 5 runs fairly well thanks to the 6-core processor. Obviously though, this is not a machine designed for gaming. These benchmarks place this Mac Pro right around the CPU performance of a 2017 5K iMac with the Core i7-7700K, and the graphics fall somewhere in line with either a desktop RX 560 or right around the Vega 16 equipped MacBook Pro. Keep in mind this is all relative, and those scores are pretty decent considering that this is 6-year-old hardware and it's a lot cheaper than a Vega 16 MacBook Pro or even a 2017 5K iMac. However, we have to examine this thing from the perspective of overall value, and it starts to get a little tricky. When I review something like an iMac and we look at the value, we have to keep in mind that it's not just a standard desktop. It provides an experience outside of just the specs and hardware that you're paying for. You're buying the 5K display, the all-in-one enclosure, the mouse and keyboard. You're paying for the slick minimalist setup, the design, and the hardware. This Mac Pro is different because, as pretty as it is, you're buying it in large part for the performance. It doesn't come with a display or a mouse or a keyboard. This is a standard desktop computer, albeit a pretty one. Because of this, I can't give it a pass for offering some improved experience to justify a higher than usual price tag for the performance that you're getting. The fact that it's still a desktop with a whole bunch of wires coming out the back means this is open to increased competition with normal build-it-yourself desktop PCs and Hackintoshes. I put together a build with largely similar performing new components on PC Part Picker, not just picking the cheapest ones, but picking good quality components, and it runs about $800, which is half of what this thing usually goes for. Comparing this thing to another Mac that you might want to buy, my old late 2015 5K iMac with the i7-6700K, 32 gigs of RAM, M395X graphics, and 500 gigabyte solid-state drive is pretty much directly comparable in terms of performance. I sold that iMac for $1,580 a few weeks ago, so it costs almost exactly the same as what this Mac Pro goes for, and it included the massive 27-inch 5K display and the all-in-one design, where this Mac Pro doesn't. One thing I will say for certain though is that you should absolutely stay away from the base 4-core version of this Mac Pro at all costs. The CPU performance is only marginally better than a mid-2012 15-inch MacBook Pro like the one I got for $350. And even those base model Mac Pros can go for $1,300 to $1,400 pretty easily. It's just a shockingly bad value. In fact, to be perfectly honest, I don't think there's any version of this Mac Pro that offers a traditionally good value for what you would want to do with this machine. It's unfortunate because I love the design and this thing is a feat of engineering, especially with that really cool cooling system, but it just doesn't perform as well as you would expect when you pay for it. This is a $1,300 machine, and in Final Cut Pro, it feels more like a used $800 MacBook Pro. I don't think it's worth $1,600 when it's so clearly limited. Apple itself has admitted that this generation was the wrong move. They pretty much backed themselves into a corner by designing the thing around having dual GPUs, which never caught on as they had hoped, and it pretty much eliminated incremental updates to the incredibly specialized design. As with all my reviews, I don't like to make a blanket statement like everyone should buy this or no one should buy this, but I really would caution you against picking this generation Mac Pro. I think there are a lot of better options for pros, even just sticking within Mac hardware. For the same amount of money, you could get the 5K iMac. You could also take a 5.1 Mac Pro and upgrade it with a 12-core, tons of user upgradable parts, and just normal desktop GPUs, and you'd have yourself much better performance and better value. It's just too expensive for what it is. I'm not going to keep this Mac Pro, but I can tell you for sure, in a couple of years when these things become a lot less expensive, I'm gonna buy one just because it's such a beautiful piece of design. I just wish it was good. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching this video. As usual, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Do you think this Mac Pro is worth it or not? Let me know why down in the comments below. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Miani, and please consider joining my subreddit. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.